What's up, guys? It's another day of the Trump administration, and I have more horrifying news. I know you're not surprised by that, but it looks like the United States has announced that we are going to start beginning to send migrants, including U.S. citizens, to prisons in El Salvador. And, this comes because Marco Rubio, the fucking Warhawk Secretary of State that got unanimously approved by even the Democrats, I'm looking at you, Bernie Sanders, Marco Rubio, the fucking Warhawk, has decided that it would be better to spend U.S. taxpayer money on putting U.S. citizens on planes to send to El Salvador, which is controlled by an authoritarian dictator. I mean, so are we, but they've been doing it for longer. I've got some coverage here for you, and I thought that we ought to just read this together, okay? This is Marco Rubio makes a deal with El Salvador to send migrants, U.S. citizens, to prisons there. Let's see. On Monday, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced that El Salvador's president, you could barely call that motherfucker a president, has agreed to accept people of any nationality who are deported from the U.S., a proposal that experts have said would likely violate international laws regarding the rights of migrants. So, guys, we have a judicial system in the United States, right? And everybody is afforded a right to a fair trial in this nation. That is something that applies to everybody. If you are here, you get a fair trial. And seemingly, that entire notion is being thrown to the wind. If you hear scratching in the background, that's because the litter box is right there and Beans is taking a shit. But El Salvador President Nayib Bukele also agreed to allow the U.S. to deport incarcerated people to El Salvador, even if they are U.S. citizens, Rubio said during a state visit to the country. So just stop for a second to think of that, guys. We already have a fuckload of prisons in the United States. We already have the largest incarcerated population on planet Earth. And Marco Rubio and the Trump administration have decided that the best course of action would be to extradite U.S. citizens out of the United States, send them to a complete foreign nation in a foreign prison, and allow them to just enact whatever they want on them. And you want to know what this is? This is because people like Marco Rubio, Warhawks, the Trump administration, a lot of the evangelical Christian community, they don't think of prison as rehabilitation. They think of prison as punishment. And they want these people to be punished as brutally as possible. Now, the thing is, guys, this is just how it begins. It starts out with you saying we're going to put the most violent criminals, only undocumented immigrants, right? Then it turns into we're going to put just violent criminals, whether they're immigrants or not. And then it turns into we're going to put, we're going to put dissidents, people who disagree with our political opinions. This is how fascism begins. And to be fair, we've been seeing the stepping stones of fascism in the United States for about 6 years now. And Donald Trump is just utilizing the oligarchy that we have been living under. You know, the oligarchy isn't new. It's just that Donald Trump has decided to just go balls to the walls and buddy up with these people. Let's keep reading some of this. Marco Rubio, who is meeting with Bukele to sign an unrelated nuclear agreement, called the deal the most unprecedented, extraordinary migratory agreement anywhere in the world. He said that the deal would allow the U.S. to deport to El Salvador dangerous criminals currently in custody and serving their sentence in the United States, even though they are U.S. citizens or legal residents. Now, this is what Rubio himself said, okay? The Trump administration has indicated that it has no plans to deport U.S. citizens who are currently incarcerated, but celebrated the deal nonetheless, right? So what does that mean? That means that, sure, maybe they're implying that right now, if you're currently incarcerated, you're not going to be deported. But in the future, even if you're a U.S. citizen, if you commit a crime, you run the risk of being fucking deported to some gulag in El Salvador where you are not privy to have like a U.S. lawyer or a U.S. court date, jury of your peers. What the fuck is happening to the entire judicial system? It's collapsing. And all of this, by the way, comes as today the U.S. begins flying fucking 30,000 migrants to a gulag in Guantanamo Bay. They're fucking making a concentration camp in Gitmo, which we've already talked about. We've already covered it. But look at this, guys. The U.S. begins flying migrants to Guantanamo. A decision to send migrants from the United States to Guantanamo Bay is a change in how the country handles people it deports. Also, guys, something important to talk about when it comes to Gitmo. Gitmo is Guantanamo Bay. The reason why we have Gitmo, right? The reason why we use it is because it's not within the United States' borders. It's technically off the coast of Cuba, right? Like, and when, even though we have control of it, if you are housed in Guantanamo Bay, you are not privy to U.S. law, right? This is why we had a whole thing about the whole problem with Guantanamo Bay was that the only reason we know about it is because somebody came out and leaked the information that we were using Guantanamo Bay as a torture facility for alleged terrorists. What ended up happening was we found out most of the people in Guantanamo Bay were not terrorists, and we found out that torture doesn't fucking work. And then the CIA decided to say, well, technically waterboarding is not torture. That's just enhanced interrogation. Enhanced interrogation is the word that they ended up going for. So it's not a coincidence that they're using Guantanamo. And granted, they've used Guantanamo before. I believe under the Clinton administration and the Obama administration, Guantanamo Bay has been used to house migrants before, but not to this fucking extreme. Not with regular fucking mom and pop children, women and children too. They were asked directly if they were going to exclude women and children from this, and the White House press secretary couldn't do it. Beans, do not fucking attack the goddamn screen. God damn it, Beans. God damn it, Beans. Stay. All right. A U.S. military plane, this is as of, by the way, February 4th. That was yesterday. A U.S. military plane flew a group of migrants from El Paso to the U.S. Navy base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, U.S. officials said on Tuesday. Significant step in President Trump's plan to house tens of thousands of deportees on the base. The first flights from the United States to Guantanamo Bay with illegal migrants are underway, the White House press secretary Caroline Levitt told Fox Business. By the way, don't even get me started on Caroline Levitt. That bitch is my fucking age, and she is married to a 60-year-old man. Luigi Dohairas Likiri. That woman is 27 years old and is married to a man that's 60 fucking years old. I can't even begin to explain how disgusting that is. Let's keep going. These migrants were transferred in an Air Force C-17 transport plane, which, by the way, cost $800,000 to fly these migrants. They arrived at the base on Tuesday evening, were expected to be held in an area far from the Pentagon's prison for terrorism suspects. The decision is a change in how the United States handles people it deports. The U.S. government has long held migrants it picked up at sea in a facility at Guantanamo Bay, but it has not flown migrants from within the United States to the base. So this is also important to talk about, guys, is that this is probably a new precedent, a new status quo. You have to understand that the Democrats are not like the good guys, right? The Republicans are pure fucking evil, but when it comes to the Democrats, they like to sit idly by and utilize the shit that they do. And if there is an election in 2028, and if the Democrats end up winning, I highly doubt that you will see them overturn this policy. This is something that we've used before, right? Let's just keep reading a little bit more of this, all right? We have 30,000 beds in Guantanamo to detain the worst criminal illegal aliens threatening the American people, Trump said. Some of them are so bad we don't even trust the countries to hold them because we don't want them coming back, so we're going to send them out to Guantanamo. It's a tough place to get out of. This is literally just like the idea that you see from like 80s movies of prisons in the fucking jungle of like El Salvador. It's because that's all Donald Trump can fucking think of. Oh, Jesus Christ. The Trump administration is engaging in political theater to threaten immigrants with detention at one of the most notorious facilities in the world with grave implications for basic rights of individuals for American rule of law, she said. Who's that? Christy Nome? Excuse me. No, Hannah Flam, the senior director of the policy. So, guys, now I wanted to make a connection here because you need to understand why this is happening. Donald Trump isn't some it's not like he has some like vendetta against like Latino people because Salma Hayek turned him down or some shit. But what Donald Trump is doing is he's trying to fatten his pockets, the billionaire pockets around him, and he probably has investments or shares, get away from the screen, or shares in things like GEO Group, who are companies who, let me just show you this, guys. Let me just show you this, okay? There are some companies who own detention facilities, private companies like GEO Group and Civic Corps and, I forgot the other one's name. It's some crazy fucking name. LaSalle, it's like French. LaSalle Corrections. And these companies, they own like almost all of the detention centers throughout the country where all of these immigrants who are being detained by ICE are going to go. And like a lot of their profit comes from the detention centers. Now, I firmly believe that Donald Trump and his cronies are profiting off of every last cell that they fill. And I wanted to show you this. Look what we have here, okay? 3 years into the Biden administration, the number of people held in ICE detentions continue to grow, and private prison companies hold an increasingly tight grip on the mass immigration centers. This is from 2023, but look at this part right here. As the ACLU has documented before, the federal government's immigration detention system overwhelmingly relies on private prison corporations. These companies here, I did the work for you. GEO Group, Core Civic, LaSalle Corrections, and the Management Training Corporation have pocketed billions from ICE detention contracts in the past 2 decades. Now, what happened was in 2021, Biden announced that there should be no private prisons, period, right? And there was an executive order that ended up being passed in January of 2021 that ordered the United States to start phasing out its contracts with private prisons. Well, guess what? Donald Trump signed an executive order on the first day that legalized the use of private prisons. Do you see what I'm implying here? Across the nation now, private prisons can be used, even though they were in the process of being fanned out. Now, I've got more here. This is going to, hopefully this will draw your attention. This is how much the GEO Group profited in 2023, okay? $2.41 billion in revenue, $113 million of net income, right? This is from the migrants that were detained, or about 50% of this money comes from the migrants that were detained. I believe there's I have some sort of split here. Let me try to find this for you guys. But what I'm trying to show you is that there are companies who are private-owned companies who are profiting off of every migrant that is detained by ICE, which is part of the reason why Donald Trump is so for the detention centers, because he wants to profit off of this. The same thing with Elon Musk. They all have shares in companies like GEO Group and Core Civic, right? Let's see. I got this one here. Now, look who owns GEO Group. BlackRock owns 13.65% of the company. Vanguard, 9.96% of the company. Fidelity, 6% of the company. Goldman Sachs, Charles Schwab. See, this GEO Group company, it's like an octopus, right? It has tentacles that leak into every single sector. And it goes further than that. It's not just GEO Group. We've also got what is this? This is this is GEO Group. Look at the donations that GEO Group made to Donald Trump during his campaign. Private Prison Behemoth, his first corporation to max out to Trump. The first corporation to max out their donations to Trump was a private prison organization, GEO Group. Let's see. The private prison behemoth GEO Group became the first corporation whose PAC maxed out to former President Donald Trump's campaign in late February, according to a Crew analysis of campaign finance records. That same month, the company used a subsidiary to give an additional $500,000 to a pro-Trump super PAC. Right? So we've got $500,000 on top of maxing out their donations, all to Trump. $5,000 contribution that the GEO Group's PAC gave to Trump's campaign was part of a larger $15,000. So it just keeps on going. $500,000, $5,000, $15,000. 2 contributions of $11,600. Guys, what MAGA? Your man is in bed with the private prison industry. And you can't be advocating for that, because they would sooner throw you in a fucking prison cell than themselves. They don't give a shit who's in the cell as long as someone's in it. Now, I believe there's one more here. We've got Core Civic. Because there's a whole bunch of different private prison organizations that help fund the Trump organization and the fascist oligarchy that is now controlling our nation. But private prison company Core Civic, get this off my screen. Private prison company Core Civic reported in a lobbying disclosure that it donated $500,000 to the Trump-Vance inaugural committee in December, underscoring the close relationship between President Donald Trump and the private prison industry. Guys, Donald Trump is the private prison industry's little bitch. You and I now, not only are people profiting off of people getting thrown in prison cells, but now if you get accused of a crime because of the Lake and Riley Act, you will not get a court date, and then you will be thrown into a prison system that may potentially extradite you to El Salvador or Guantanamo Bay, where you are no longer privy to the same civil rights as your fellow American. All in the name of making America great again, right? This industry, the for-profit prison industry, is pure fucking evil. There are some things that simply you should not profit from. I feel like that isn't controversial. Anyway, guys, I'm going to keep my finger on the pulse, try to get more news for you. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, fucking do all the things that YouTubers tell you to do. Anyway, have a good one.